Hey everyone, the guys are back together this week with a lot to go over. They'll cover another controversy with the NFL officiating, potential coaching changes, and look at Jeff's take on the MVP race. They'll break down the playoff picture from every angle, including all the playoff clinching scenarios heading into Week 18. But hey, what do they know?
What do they know? Well, we are about to find out. What's going on, everybody? We are back together, better than ever, for the Week 17 edition of the What Do They Know podcast. Nick and Jeff, our co-host, is finally back after 2 weeks off. Made it back healthy, so that's all good. How was your trip, man?
Yeah, it was fun. Obviously, my sister got married. I was telling you about it. So obviously, that's always a joyous time with family and whatnot. Yep. But got to walk her down the aisle, so that was awesome. Honor and a privilege for that.
Awesome.
So yeah, she's no longer my problem. Fantastic.
That's a win. That's a win.
That's a win. Yep.
Awesome. Well, good. So we are going to dive in. We have a full show, I think, a full agenda. So we'll dive in with top stories. Mm-hmm. I know you have a couple things you want to talk about. I'm going to kick it off just going over, once again, the NFL referees are in the spotlight. I hate starting our show with this, but right. I feel like it was such a big call again this week. So for those who may not have seen the Saturday night game, the Lions at the Cowboys, under a minute left, Detroit had just scored to go. They were down 20-19, decided to go for 2-point conversion, go for the win. They ran basically a trick play to where they ended up throwing it to one of their linemen, who is technically not usually eligible to catch a ball. He caught it. It was good. They were going to win. And then the referee, the head ref, is saying that he didn't report.
Right.
Obviously, the Lions sideline broke out and was livid. You can see him walk up to the ref and obviously say something. The ref makes eye contact with him. Mm-hmm. Ends up being a 5-yard penalty. They have to redo the try. They don't get it. They lose by 1 point.
Right.
Now, after the game, what makes it worse, in my opinion, is Dan Campbell, the head coach, said that he talked to that whole referee crew prior to the game. The head referee, his name's Brad Allen, told him specifically about that play and everything that went into it.
Right.
And the refs still got it wrong. Now, what they said is that, so number 68 is the one who caught the pass, the one who technically should have reported as eligible.
Right.
The refs said that number 70 is the one that reported.
Mm-hmm.
He had been reporting all game, apparently, which you could argue was part of Detroit's plan to kind of set that play up, was have 70 report all game long. And then, and when they actually want to use it, they have somebody else report as eligible to kind of throw off the defense. But when you hear that, they briefed the referees on it, and then you hear both number 70 say, I didn't say anything. He was much more colorful than that, but right. He essentially said, I didn't say a word.
Right.
And then you hear 68, I think his last name is Decker, say that, hey, I did exactly what my coaches told me to. I walked up to the referee and I said, report.
Right.
So somebody is lying. Right. And I think that's the thing, is like, referees are human. Referees make mistakes, but just own it. Just be like, look, because basically what everybody's saying is that because 70 was reporting all game long, he just naturally assumed that even though he was making eye contact with the person, he didn't take the time to look down and say, hey, this isn't 70, this is 68, this is somebody different. And so people are human, but I think number one for me is own it.
Right.
But number two, I mean, I can say people make mistakes, but at some point, like, the referees just got to be better.
Right.
And for me personally, I'll let you give your take on it in a minute, but for me personally, is I know that every single time there's a big call or a missed call, you have those people that you see on social media that say, well, the NFL's rigged. They clearly want this team. But we laugh, but they mean it. Like, those people mean it. Like, oh, the NFL's clearly rigged. No. They want such and such team to be in the championship, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just so sick of that narrative. Like, the people that think that, like, that the NFL could actually be rigged that extensively, where people are deciding games, refs, like, there's just so much that goes into this product to think that. I think is just ridiculous. But it's stuff like that does not help my case, or does not help the case of people who think that the NFL is legitimate. Right.
And you have all these spreads, and all of a sudden, oh, well, how did Vegas know it was going to be exactly 5.5, and it's a 5-point turnout somehow.
Right.
So, I mean, I understand the narrative, because obviously there's little I guess coincidences that happen, like the refs, I guess determining the outcome of games such as this game. Honestly, yeah, we're all human, but at the same time, these are professional referees that get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars
per game.
Yeah, just do the job that they do. And this is week 17. It's like it's week 1. It's not like it's a preseason game. It's not. It's week 17, and the playoffs are about to get ramped up. Just like with the team, you'd think you'd have some sort of flow. You'd have some sort of I guess routine to at least know that, hey, these guys have been coming up to me and reporting as eligible and ineligible, but each play is different. Especially with the way NFL schemes are composed of these days and built these days. Things are going to be coming up the wazoo that is going to be a little unexpected. So to just assume that number 70 is coming up to you to report again, that's a big no-no in my book. Yeah. So obviously this is I feel like this is the first time I've heard of a referee crew being downgraded, though. So
what I was going to say next is they are the same crew that got just crucified the Sunday night game. They were the Chiefs at the Packers, the Sunday night game where, and I admittedly didn't watch that game, but apparently there was a pass interference call that was blatant one way or the other and wasn't called.
Yeah, I think it was the defender basically jumping on the back of the receiver, a Packer against a Chief receiver. Yep.
So this crew has been in the spotlight before.
Right.
And we talk about people saying that it's fixed or whatever, but there was also big ramifications to this. So if Detroit had won, they would have locked up at minimum the number 2 seed.
Right.
And if they had won, they would have still had a chance to lock up the number 1 seed. They needed San Francisco to lose, blah, blah, blah. But now that's a non-factor.
Right.
Now they are slated to be the number 3, and they need to win this week, and they need the Cowboys and the Eagles to both lose.
Because a lot trickier of a situation.
It's way trickier. It was pretty, black and white.
Right.
If you win, you get the number 2.
Right.
And now that,
in the end, they might be going to Dallas.
Correct.
So
essentially it cost them at least two home game versus 1.
Right.
Which is a big deal. So again, I hate starting our show with that. I think, the referees get enough slack, but when it's stuff like this and it's continuously, a talking point nationwide,
right.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, obviously as fans, we want the players to determine the outcomes of the games, and the referees are just there to, I guess, maintain chaos and maintain order and stuff like that. But it's definitely gone to a point. I feel like, especially NFL refs, I understand the speed of the NFL is pretty intense. It's pretty rapid. But at the same time, I'd probably take half the money and I'd probably dedicate myself throughout the entire year just learning the NFL rules and regulations and stuff like that. I mean, you're getting paid a hefty amount to make sure you're doing your job. And and I mean, there's a lot of people out there that do bet on games, and that's a reality of it. And that just creates even more chaos because, like you said, as we touched base on it, all of a sudden people are calling out rigged games and whatnot. So it's not a good look for the NFL. But I honestly hope the refs kind of get held more accountable going forward. I know I feel like they have a union that's purely referee.
They do.
And that's probably what contains a lot of the punishment. But at this point, I hope this whole downgrade is a message to all the refs that, hey, we're looking.
It's good, right? It's the first time we've seen anything. Because we've talked on this show before about how the NFL players are held to such a high standard. I mean, shoot, if they spike the ball the wrong way or wear the wrong colored socks or whatever, they're getting fined, they're getting a penalty.
Right.
Where a ref can make a decision that costs a game one way or the other and nothing happens.
Exactly.
So this is the first time we've seen it.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
So the other one I wanted to talk about before, I know you have a story that you want to discuss, and this is kind of just something more to keep an eye on, that I thought was interesting, that it came out this week that Jim Harbaugh, who is the coach of the Michigan Wolverines, who as of this second just went to the college football championship.
Yep, they just stopped
in real time.
Yep.
That just happened.
They just stopped Alabama.
So Michigan's going to the college football championship. But he just hired an agent who has heavy ties to the NFL.
Right.
And so it's been speculated pretty much all season with all his suspensions, all the stuff he's been, had going on in the college football circles, that he would be coming to the NFL next year. And I feel like that pretty much solidifies that Jim Harbaugh is going to be in the NFL next year.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what was his first stint in San Francisco?
And it was successful.
Right.
4 or 5 years.
4 or 5 years.
That's his thing, though. That's his reputation. Is like he comes in, he's a hard nosed coach. Everybody loves playing for him for the first couple of years, and then he just wears out his welcome because he's that way.
Right.
And so this kind of fits with the timeline, especially when you talk about everything that happened in Michigan this year. With him going to the NFL. So I'm really curious. I think tons of teams will be lining up to get him.
As he should.
I've heard Vegas. I've heard apparently, and I didn't read this, but I heard that the agent specifically that he hired has heavy ties to like the Las Vegas Raiders organization, which I think that Antonio Pierce should win that job based on the how he's done so far. But
right.
And I've talked about it on the show already. I would really like to see him go to the Chargers and have Justin Herbert and see what he can do there.
Right. I mean, in terms of the Raiders, obviously Antonio Pierce kind of reminds me of like a Dan Campbell, the hard-nosed, gritty type of football coach that's going to hold you accountable.
Yep.
Just surround him with good coordinators and let the coordinators kind of determine how you scheme offensively, and let your head coach be that leader of the football team more so than the schematic person. So Antonio Pierce, I feel like, is that guy. Whether the Raiders go that route, I'm not sure, but I feel like Antonio Pierce at least has done enough to warrant a job somewhere in the NFL.
Agreed.
As for Harbaugh, obviously, I feel like he's the opposite of his brother, who has a very proven longevity in Baltimore.
Yep.
And obviously Baltimore has the number 1 seed there. But, I mean, Harbaugh, I feel he's a really good coach. Honestly, if you want to get to the top, you're going to have to get pushed a little bit.
Yep.
And I feel like Harbaugh is the type of coach to do that.
No doubt.
He's been to a Super Bowl. He lost to his brother, didn't he?
He did.
Yep. Back when Colin Kaepernick
Ravens and Niners.
That's right. So, I mean, he has the pedigree to lead your team somewhere. It's not like it's some unknown or something. But yeah, in terms of Harbaugh, I'd definitely be wanting the Saints to look at him personally.
Yeah, yep. I don't doubt it. Yep. I don't doubt it.
Yep.
So curious to see what happens there. Obviously, now they're moving on to the championship. So, I mean, shoot, if he wins next Monday in the champion, that would be a perfect way to leave.
Right.
Quite honestly,
right?
Leave on top. So we'll see what happens.
Right.
What do you got for us?
So this week I got the Bears on the clock.
Okay.
So that's my number 1 story.
Via Carolina.
So Carolina, they lost. Cardinals won. So that locked up the Bears as the number 1 overall pick now. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do with that pick.
Yep.
Obviously they have Justin Fields there at quarterback,
who's played pretty well the last few weeks.
Honestly, I want Justin Fields to be in Chicago. I feel like Chicago.
It's such an interesting situation, right? Because I mean, 3-4 weeks ago, Fields is gone and the head coach is gone. Now they're what 7-9. I mean, obviously they got eliminated this week, but not because they lost, because other teams won.
Right.
And so, I mean, you had the fans were literally chanting, "We want Fields."
Right. Yeah. I mean, I feel like Fields has kind of shown enough to warrant another year as the starter there in Chicago. I feel like
to pass on a quarterback 2 years in a row with the number 1 pick.
I know
that. I mean, you gotta be 1,000% sure that Justin Fields is your guy,
right?
And I don't think you can be at this point, personally.
And then, I mean, that creates the other discussion of, is there a quarterback in this draft class that you would take? I mean, obviously,
if you listen to the scouts, there are.
Right.
There's several.
Right.
But who knows?
I feel like every year that happens, though. And that's why quarterbacks are always taken so high.
Right.
And I honestly, going into the season, you would have thought Caleb Williams was a lock for the number 1 overall pick, hearing from all the scouts and everyone who centered themselves around the draft in college football. But I mean, as the season has gone, I feel like his stock has kind of plummeted a little bit.
I agree.
And some of these other quarterbacks have kind of risen from nowhere. Drake May is still that second, I guess, rated quarterback.
Yep.
Even though I don't hear much about him at all coming out of North Carolina. So we'll see there. I mean, obviously you have those two that were competing for the number 1 overall pick pre-hand, but then all of a sudden you have Jaden Daniels from LSU, and you have a couple of others who won the Heisman this year.
Jaden Daniels.
Yeah. Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
So even better. So Michael Penix in Washington, he was a finalist. I remember that. So it's just one of those things where you'll have options, but at the same time, are those options going to be better than Justin Fields, or would you rather take like a Marvin Harrison Jr. wide receiver? I mean, you're still going to have what the number, I think maybe a number
top 10,
top 10 pick there. Yeah, you can either do what you did last year, trade down, and just keep piling assets forward until it pays off. When that pays off, that'll be up to the GM to decide when to pull the trigger on all those assets. But it's a fascinating situation. I personally would stick with Fields in Chicago.
It's funny. I think you're in the minority on that.
Am I?
I think so. Just based on what I'm reading and at least with my thoughts as well.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, who knows? If the fans say one thing, but I don't know, man. I just think
I feel like Justin Fields has enough arm talent, and he's young enough to still be potent with his legs. I agree. It's just about getting him in the right scheme, like Baltimore has done with Lamar Jackson.
Yep.
And getting him the right, I guess, weapons around him, whether that's wide receivers. They have DJ Moore. DJ Moore is a stud.
Yep.
He's proven that he can be a number 1 in that offense with Justin Fields. It's just about building your offensive line and maybe a little bit more talent in the running back position. But Justin Fields, in my opinion, has done enough, and I think he would be the answer over. I'd take him over any potential quarterbacks coming off the draft this year.
It's going to be. I feel like it's going to dictate really the whole offseason,
right?
What he does, because I was telling you earlier, I heard a report yesterday from an NFL reporter. I don't remember what his name was or who he was actually associated with, but he tweeted that he's heard a rumor that the Jets are going to try and acquire him as their backup to Rodgers next year, and potentially like the stepping stone after Rodgers. And as a Jet fan, I would love that. Right. Not only to have a competent backup, but to have a plan going forward. I talked about on a couple episodes ago, drafting a guy and having him shadow Rodgers. I feel like Fields would be even better than that, in my opinion. So he's going to dictate the whole offseason because of people that want a quarterback. Are they going to draft? Are they going to trade for Fields? It all starts with what Chicago's going to do and how they value him. So it's going to be really, really interesting.
Yeah, that's going to be, I guess, the next step is what do you trade if you're going to move on from Fields? What do you trade him for? Like, what is his worth? Is it a first round pick?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so
picks are like used cars. As soon as you drive them off the lot, they lose their value.
Yep. As soon as you pick a player,
as soon as a player is actually associated to that pick, you lose their value. Exactly. So even though you used a number 1 on him, you're not going to get a number 1 in return. Exactly. In my opinion.
Right. No. So say Chicago drafted Caleb Williams number 1. Right now, they could trade that number 1 overall pick for an entire draft class.
Yes.
As soon as they draft Caleb Williams, they will not get an entire draft class for Caleb Williams.
Correct.
So that's always been odd to me.
Yep.
So, but to me, Justin Fields would probably. I mean, obviously, everybody knows the situation Chicago is in, where they have this predicament. So, if there's any indication where they're going to move on from Justin Fields,
going to be ringing like crazy.
Yep, and I'm curious to see if there's going to be some sort of, I guess, face off with other organizations trying to trade for Justin Fields, and that's going to drive his stock up, or if they're going to be like, oh, he's going to move on from Chicago's going to move on from Justin Fields anyway, so that drives his stock down.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting. As for the Jets thing, I find that, no offense to you, but I find that as like a bad fit because of Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers isn't mobile in Justin Fields' sense. Obviously, he's an older quarterback. I feel like it's just two schematically different offenses, where I feel like I've seen that sort of thing play out, and as soon as that backup comes in,
they'd have to change it.
They'd have to change
1,000%.
everything in that offense. And obviously, as soon as he comes in, he's going to look terrible. If, say, Aaron Rodgers gets hurt mid-game or something.
Yeah, let's not speak that.
I'm just talking about possibilities.
I've dealt with that enough this season.
You know,
I'm not hearing that next season.
I'm not jinxing anything, but I'm just talking about possibilities. If he goes out mid-game, Justin Fields is going to have to probably force himself to play with the game script that they had for Aaron Rodgers, and that's just not his game.
Right.
So obviously, it'll take a little bit of time to readjust. But how much time do you have, especially in that AFC East where the Bills and the Dolphins, you don't have a lot of, I guess, time or a lot of games to lose before you're out of the thick of it real quick in that division.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that whole interesting conversation is going to be definitely consistent throughout the offseason.
Yep. Agreed.
Yep.
All right. So the last thing I want to talk about before we get into the playoff race is just a really kind of interesting topic that I had last week that we ended up putting out on social media and got a lot of interaction this week. So thank you all for that. And that's just the MVP race.
Right.
Did you listen last week? Did you listen to my opinion?
I did.
All right. So start by telling me what you thought, and then what you currently think, and you know.
I feel like you're right on it with like the MVP's kind of become a QB award, and I feel like it's a combination of two things. Writers being a little bit lazy because they're just like, oh, it's the most important position on the field. Let's just give it to the person who produces the most on that position, and bam, wham, jam.
I agree.
I'm done.
I agree.
So it's a little bit of that laziness, and also, I guess, the difficulty it is to compare stats from different positions.
Yep.
Obviously, a wide receiver it's tough to make an argument for him like you did for Tyreek Hill because he's so dependent on the quarterback.
Yep.
So at that point, if it's the receiver putting up these stats, well, obviously someone's passing them the ball, so it becomes the QB. With running backs, especially like in McCaffrey's case, who receives the ball a lot. Once again, who's passing the ball to QB?
I feel like that's the whole like what comes first argument: the chicken or the egg.
Exactly.
Is the wide receiver dependent on the quarterback, or is the quarterback dependent on the wide receiver?
Right.
So it's and somebody on social media said this week. It's completely subjective. There's no guidelines, there's no rules that show what the MVP, like what you have to do to win the MVP. And so it's always going to be your opinion. There's always going to be 17 million answers from people, because it's completely subjective.
And this brings me to my argument where I'm starting to feel like the MVP is kind of flawed, is the word itself, because all of a sudden we have awards now that have say that this is the best offensive performer, this is the best defense, and this is the best overall talent or whatever. Yep. Like obviously we do these things during the ESPYs, best athlete of the year or whatever.
Yep.
So with the MVP, it becomes sort of, I guess, because of the difficulty to adjust and read different stat lines and compare and say what's better than this. That's why it's become kind of that lazy QB award type of thing.
Yep.
So I mean, I can't necessarily flock on the media too much for doing that, but at the same time, I personally was like looking at defensive players, just to like put someone defensively. Yep. Because I honestly, you look at top defensives, you see.
You joke about that,
right?
But
like Myles Garrett.
I was just going to
say,
a lot of people
Garrett.
on national media, ESPN radio, they talk about Myles Garrett a lot.
I love Myles Garrett. Like MVP, like I feel like MVP should transcend stats and be more looked at closely of like who's the vocal leader or the leader on the field for this team. Obviously, you went on to how Jim, your dad, goes on about what does this team look like without that player.
Yep.
And I feel like leadership is a huge role when it comes to MVP awards, but at the same time, MVP, when that sort of thing doesn't show up on stat line, so you can't really numerify it. So it's hard to. It becomes subjective again. It becomes, well, how important really are they? So it's one of those things where I'm starting to hate the MVP award because
it's kind of annoying.
Yeah, it is.
Especially this year, because I feel like it's been different from years past where literally every single week it's changed.
Right.
There's who no the guy is.
Right.
Every single week is somebody different.
Yeah. And I mean, like, it's terrible because every season you go into into the season with your favorites, and then you kind of stay on there until someone proves you wrong, and then all of a sudden, as soon as you jump ship, you're jumping ship all over the place. Like who had the hot week this week?
Yep.
All of a sudden you're on that ship.
Yep.
And it's just one of those things where I'm not a fan of that, especially when I'm trying to look at every single player individually and find who is actually making the difference for their team.
Yep.
On and off the field type of thing. But for me right now, I personally would love to give it to McCaffrey in terms of what we're valuing now. Simply because I know you have him as like a system plug and play type of thing. I think McCaffrey kind of transcends the running back position in a certain way. I don't think there's another running back in the NFL that matches his skill set really. To me, McCaffrey, especially with that touchdown streak, it just shows how much that offense runs through him in a way.
So here's my argument to that, and I was thinking about that throughout this week because we put this out on social media, and I got a little bit of flack for it, and that's fine. I'm always
right.
I'm always good for a respectful conversation. I have no problem with that.
Right.
But I got a little bit of heat for using the system word with San Francisco with Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey.
Right.
Now, I was thinking about it with McCaffrey because I was like, with McCaffrey specifically, with Purdy, I'm sorry, you can't convince me that he's the MVP. I love Brock Purdy. You can't convince me.
Right.
McCaffrey, I was kind of like, okay, like I'm teetering on maybe I overstepped. Maybe I, wasn't exactly my best take. And I'm sitting here thinking about it. But then it hit me. Deebo Samuel was Christian McCaffrey before McCaffrey was there. He was doing everything that McCaffrey is doing. Obviously, he wasn't playing running back to the extent that McCaffrey was.
Right.
But he was running the ball a heck of a lot more than he is now. He was catching the ball. He got paid because of the year he had right before Christian McCaffrey got there.
Right.
So that's my point. Is like maybe, okay, so Deebo's not a running back, but he was still doing what Christian McCaffrey is doing now in that system. And he was being extremely successful.
Right.
He was Deebo is still a stud, but he's not what he was 2 years ago because now McCaffrey is in that role.
Right.
So my point is, I that's my point with the whole plug and play.
Right.
Is that if you have a guy that has the same skill set, Deebo, you could argue, is very similar to McCaffrey.
Right.
Like that's my whole point.
Yeah. The only problem is that Deebo is a wide receiver and McCaffrey is a running back, and all of a sudden, well, obviously Deebo's a wide receiver. You want him outside. You want him a little bit in space over there, especially like a wide receiver, a little bubble screen or something. That's where you kind of want him. And I mean, I would wonder what the adjustment would be to move him all the way to running back, and why they never really pulled the trigger on that, even though he was blossoming in that role. I'm assuming there's got to be some sort of reason for that. He's there, like I said, maybe he's better outside. Maybe he's faster on the sidelines outside. Passing, you can trust him to run past a cornerback. You don't need to match him against the linebacker every time coming off a wheel route or something. But to me, it's just one of those things where Deebo Samuel, yes, he would carry that offense, and I feel like if they lost him, then
I mean, think about their 3-game losing streak. Who was out?
Deebo. Right. Yep. I mean, at the same time, Brock Purdy didn't play his best games, but at the same time, what's the reason for that? Is it just bad games? Is it because of Deebo's absence?
Trent Williams, which I also mentioned in my conversation on social media, was because the comment was made when Brock Purdy doesn't play well, they don't play well. They don't win.
Right.
So basically, the person was like, they go as he goes.
Right.
And I kind of rebutted with, well, you could argue that it was because Trent Williams and Brock Purdy were out, or excuse me, Deebo was out, not because Brock Purdy just didn't play well, because he didn't have the pieces.
Right. The doesn't play well argument doesn't have much merit to me, because it's like, well, if the worst player on the team who played well, then also that transcends our defense. Does that make him the MVP? No, obviously not. He plays to the skill level that I guess those around him make him to be. So that, I guess, kind of disqualifies him from being MVP, because he doesn't elevate everybody else. I feel like everybody elevates him. Yep. And not to knock on Brock Purdy, because he's taken advantage of every opportunity he's gotten, and he's shown that he's capable of being an NFL starter at this level. It's just one of those things where he's he's more of a product of the sum around him rather
That's exactly what I said on social media. I said the 49ers are they're an amazing team, but they're amazing because of the sum of their total parts, not because of Brock Purdy alone.
Right. Yeah,
that's exactly what I said.
Yep, Brock Purdy doesn't convince me. McCaffrey is a little bit of a different situation for me because I feel like he's just that much more above everybody else at his running back position and how much he can affect defenses. But yeah, I mean, I guess to counteract myself, I can go back to that week where San Francisco blew out Jacksonville like 34-3.
Yep.
And that's when McCaffrey lost his touchdown streak.
Yep.
So it's like, well, he didn't score that.
They did it without him.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So, I mean,
and he didn't score this week.
Right.
But,
exactly.
I mean, he got injured, but
right, a calf injury. But see, this is the sort of things I would, as a voter, I'd probably look more closely into. Like, how much did he affect that Jacksonville defense? How much attention was brought to him, allowing everybody else to, I guess, roam free a little bit more, allowing plays to go out that way. Like, obviously, McCaffrey didn't get a touchdown for some reason. I'm pretty sure San Francisco was trying to probably get him to that touchdown, and Jacksonville just wasn't allowing it.
Right.
That has to be some sort of defensive attention that they're giving to him. So to me, that's the sort of thing that I look for, and I'd probably look a lot more closely if I was a voter. And that's why I'd still argue with McCaffrey. Instead of, I know you have Lamar Jackson. I know you wrote that comment on that social media post about Lamar Jackson. But for me, I just to end the QB oriented accolades there with the MVP, I'd probably go McCaffrey.
Yeah. So for those who may not have seen it, we put it out on social media this week, basically a brief clip of, my comment last week about the MVP race and how I thought that as of last week, Tyreek Hill was the MVP. Mm-hmm. And I threw out basically 4 names and we put it out as kind of like a poll. Mm-hmm. Brock Purdy, McCaffrey, Lamar Jackson, and Tyreek Hill. Who's your MVP?
Right.
And we got a lot of responses. So I really appreciate that. It was probably the most interactive clip or comment, whatever, that we've had so far this season. So we really appreciate the participation. And I would say the majority, Tyreek got a couple second place votes, but pretty much everybody, it was either Lamar Jackson or McCaffrey.
Right.
There were a couple people that suggested Josh Allen, which actually made me stop and think for a few minutes. Honestly, I was like, like he hasn't really been talked about for several weeks.
Right.
But if you look at his, what the Bills are doing, he runs the ball in, he throws the ball, blah, blah, blah. So I went and I pulled up his stats, and I'm not going to sit here and read them, but they're not pretty. I mean, they're winning games, but like for example, against the Cowboys, he had 7 completions for 94 yards.
Money.
This week against New England, he didn't have a touchdown. He had 15 completions for 169 yards and an interception. Mm-hmm. I talked about this with my brother-in-law yesterday, who's a diehard Bills fan. I think as much as the running game for Buffalo has drastically helped them as a team, it's taken Josh Allen out of the flow of what he does, in my opinion. He's not putting up as many numbers and as the gaudy stats that he used to. So for me personally, Josh Allen's not in it. I did pause and say maybe I missed him and I should have considered him in my conversation, but after looking at some of his stat lines, I don't necessarily think that he fits.
Well, here, I'll read his stat lines.
Please do. Please do.
So, I mean, with Josh Allen, it kind of reminds me of the Brock Purdy situation that we were just talking about. If he plays bad, then the Bills play bad. If he plays good, the Bills play good. Like, it's just one of those things where you can't say if he plays well, that's why he deserves the MVP. That conversation or that argument just doesn't flow with me. But Josh Allen, for the year, is at 65.6% completion percentage, 39 or a little bit over 3,900 passing yards, 27 TDs, 16 interceptions, 16. Yep. But then you go to his rushing stats, he's got 457 rushing yards, 15 TDs.
Yeah, that's crazy. I think so what is that? 27 and 15. That's 42 total touchdowns.
Yep, 42 total touchdowns.
I think that probably leads the NFL, or is pretty dang close.
Right.
So that he 1,000% has going for him. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. He's not there for me personally.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I understand the situation where Josh Allen, because he's that explosive player.
Yep.
He's that marketable player.
He's transcendent.
Yep.
People love to talk about him one way or the other.
Yep. He's pay to watch type of football, and I understand why people want to see him play, and I feel like anything he does, if he does the same thing another quarterback does, he gets more credit for it because he's Josh Allen.
Correct.
And that's how it works with marketable players like him. But those 16 INTs though, I didn't even look up his fumble losses, but
he's got some fumbles as well.
I know he's got fumbles, so he's got a lot of turnovers.
Yep.
So
that's his thing.
So my thing is, you can't win an MVP if you're also leading the league in turnovers. That's just going to be a bad, I guess, precedent. It just means you can be as careless with the ball as much as you want, as long as some of it leads to explosive plays. So to me, I'd like I said, I'd go more with McCaffrey rather than Josh Allen. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So as of last week, I was Tyreek Hill. As of yesterday, I'm 1,000% on board with Lamar Jackson.
You're on Jackson
personally.
Train, huh?
I mean, you talk about the game he had yesterday, just to kind of put a bow on this MVP conversation.
Mm-hmm.
5 touchdowns, over 300 yards. He had a perfect passer rating, 158.3 against the second best team in the conference, at least on paper.
Right.
We could have that conversation, but on paper, that's the second best team in the conference, their biggest competition, and they waxed them.
Yep.
53-19 or 54-19 or something like that. Absolutely waxed them.
Yeah, 50 plus.
So for me, I'm completely on the Lamar Jackson train.
Mm-hmm.
He's got my vote. You can't convince me otherwise.
Right.
With 1 week to go.
Yeah, I mean, Lamar Jackson, that's half the argument to make against. I mean, Jackson is kind of made that offensive scheme that Todd Monken came in and put kind of his own. Obviously, he started off a little rough, but he's definitely picked it up during the second half of the season. Honestly, I just love what Todd Monken was doing and what the vision he had and how he's implemented it. Obviously, you look at his wide receivers. I mean, they're good, they're solid, but there's nothing transcendent about an older OBJ or
inconsistent Zay Flowers.
Yeah, first year player, rookie, Zay Flowers.
Backup tight end,
Mark Andrews
is playing great.
Mark Andrews got out, but likely is now in. And then he, not to mention, they lost their number one running back week one.
Week one.
So I mean, even with all these parts kind of, I guess, being in flux or playing a little bit inconsistently, he's been the one to lead that team to a number one seed in the AFC.
Yep.
So as much as I like McCaffrey just for the non-QB conversation, I have no problem with Lamar Jackson winning the MVP this year.
Okay. Glad we're on the same page there.
Yep.
All right. We are almost 40 minutes in, and we haven't even talked about the playoff picture yet. So buckle up, folks.
Yep.
Because we got some explaining to do. We got some talking to do.
Some routes to explore.
Because we got 1 week left. Yep. And next week is going to be a ton of fun.
Yep.
So just to kind of summarize what has happened so far, San Francisco and Baltimore have both locked up the number one seeds. They got the first round bye. They got the home field advantage throughout the playoffs. And then other teams that have clinched a playoff spot so far. In the AFC, it's only 3 other teams. You got Miami. Mm-hmm. You got Kansas City, who won their division yesterday, and you got Cleveland, who has clinched a wild card spot at the what do they have? 10 wins, I think it is. 11 wins, excuse me. And then in the NFC, you got Dallas, Detroit, Philly, and the Rams actually clinched yesterday. Mm-hmm. In addition to obviously the number one seeds that we already talked about. So there is still a lot to be decided, and a lot of different scenarios that can play out next week. Mm-hmm. There's a couple, we wrote down basically every team's scenario that we can go over just real quick.
It gets a little overwhelming.
It gets a little overwhelming. Obviously, I think the Vikings, they need to win, and then they need to have like
everybody else
four teams lose. I didn't write that one down. Obviously, there's several teams where the easiest solution is just win and you're in.
Right.
So those teams, I think it's easy to start with that. The Bills, they win against Miami, they're in. Jacksonville, the winner of Texas and Indianapolis, the Texans and Indianapolis, whoever wins that game is in.
Nope.
So that's going to be fun. And then we have Pittsburgh. So they need a little bit of help.
Right.
Pittsburgh needs to win, and then they need to lose. They need a loss by Jacksonville or Buffalo, just one of the two. And then in the NFC, Green Bay is winning in, which I never thought, going into this season we would be saying that.
Right.
The Seahawks, they need to win, and they need the Packers to lose. And then the NFC South. The NFC South.
Yeah, NFC South.
I texted you about it yesterday, man. This division, I'm just so flabbergasted and confused by trying to figure out who the freak wants to win this division. Obviously, the Saints pretty handily, they took care of Tampa Bay yesterday.
Right.
And now they're both tied. Well, they're both 8-8. They're both 8-8, and then Atlanta's 7-9.
Right.
So all three teams are technically still in it.
Yep. Atlanta can still win the division,
which is crazy.
Yep.
Which is crazy. Tampa Bay, if they win, they're in. Which for them, if they win, they're in. If they lose, they're eliminated because of tiebreakers. They have no scenario where they lose.
And they
they're
get a wild card.
Thankfully for them, they're playing Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll take that for what it's worth.
Right.
The Saints are actually, I read this, they're the only out of the three teams. They're the only one that could not win the division and still get in as a wild card team.
Yeah.
So they got to win, obviously, but then they need the Bucks, or excuse me, if the Bucks win and they can't win the division, then the Saints can get in by a win and a loss by both Seattle and Green Bay, which are the two teams ahead of them.
Yep.
I think, sorry, buddy. If Tampa Bay was not playing Carolina, I'd say that I really like your chances.
Right. Well, see, I remember 2 weeks ago you sent me a message about Baker Mayfield, about how you were like, "Oh, my boy, Baker Mayfield."
Boy. I called this at the beginning of the season, man. Obviously, I didn't call them to win the division, but I thought that they were going to have a really good season.
Yeah, I thought they were going to be terrible.
Yeah, I know. You picked them last.
I picked them last to be last. So
what do they know?
Well, obviously not much. But yeah, I saw that and I was like, well, just wait till next week. And obviously, you saw the Saints just blow up the Buccaneers.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those. I've kind of given up trying to figure out the South divisions in both AFC and NFC conferences. So I'm like, we'll just see it a week to week basis what happens. Obviously, the Saints are kind of reeling from that loss they had against the Packers earlier in the season, where they were up like 17-0 going into like the fourth quarter or something like that. So that was a bad loss. That would have them in the playoff spot right now. I would have them actually leading the division right now, but it is what it is. At this point, the Packers play the Bears,
correct,
and then Seahawks play
at
Cardinals?
At Arizona,
the Cardinals.
Which I mean,
neither of those games are gimmies.
So, spoiler alert: my upset this week is the Cardinals over the Seahawks.
Ooh,
because I mean the Cardinals just came off of a big upset win over the Eagles, and so Kyler Murray, that was his best game this season since he's come back off injury. So I don't think that's an easy win for Seattle by any means.
No, ever since Kyler Murray came back, Arizona has not been that cakewalk that they were early in the season. But yeah, that's not a cakewalk for Seattle. Obviously, Chicago's picked it back up.
Oh yeah,
they're 7-9
for sure.
They're Justin Fields obviously has.
He would love to play. He would love to play spoiler.
Yep, absolutely, especially against the Packers. So, I mean, the outside chance of NFC South sending two teams.
That would be. Could you imagine?
I feel like it'd be very undeserving, but at the same time, it's very possible. So, I mean, obviously, I'm not. Obviously, I'm all souped up in my Saints gear. So, all season I've been kind of like, I'd rather miss the playoffs if they're just going to be terrible.
But you're taking the chance.
But I'm taking the chance.
Yep.
Let's get us in and see what happens. So this is where the fan comes out.
Get the 4 seeds so you can get blown out by Philadelphia.
That's
or the Cowboys.
Well, pick your poison type of thing. So I mean, it's going to be a tough in, but at the same time, don't count them out. Don't count them out.
Don't count them out at all. They're playing. Their offense is playing well, especially not for nothing. They did it pretty easily without any production from Kamara or Olave on Sunday.
Yep. I mean,
to the detriment of my fantasy team.
I mean, all season they've had the weapons to lose. Maybe if the defense focuses on Kamara or Olave, they have the weapons to make up for that. It's just about getting the schematics all in order. And obviously, it's taken a very long time for that to get through to everybody. Obviously, I don't know if you've heard the reports, but I've heard Dallas Allen is probably going to return next year. So Derek Carr,
really?
Yep. The only one who looks like he's going to be fired is their offense coordinator.
Okay, which that's what you wanted.
Yeah, initially that was when I went into the season, like maybe the first quarter of the season. I was like, that's probably where they need to change. Obviously, they've waited all season to do it, and we'll see if they pull the trigger in this offseason if they make the playoffs. Because if they make the playoffs and all of a sudden maybe they win a game, then all of a sudden the whole scenario changes.
Yeah.
So you never know. But in terms of the NFC, yeah, it's going to be a wild ride, especially with, I guess, the Vikings still in it.
With 18 quarterbacks that they've played throughout the year.
Yep. So I'd be interested to see who they're going to start this week, actually. So
I thought they gave up on Josh Dobbs way too quickly.
Oh yeah,
for
sure.
What he did for them for the first 2 games. He had one bad game, and they benched him.
Yep.
I was shocked by that.
Yep. Especially considering what options they had behind him.
Yep.
Nick Mullins and who's the other?
I don't even know.
Hall.
Yeah, something Hall. Jared Hall.
Jalen Hall. Something. Yeah. So, I mean, it's crazy to think about how they moved on so quickly when they were still in prime position to get that playoff spot.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe they're on the same fence of let's see what we got instead of limping into the playoffs and getting blown out by Dallas or Detroit or whoever. So, I mean, I can't fault them for that mentality, but their fan base will.
Yeah,
I'll tell you that.
Absolutely. I'm really curious. You made a prediction at the beginning of the season, which was bold at the time, but looks spot on right now with, the Chiefs, saying that the Chiefs are going to be one and done.
Oh yeah.
I am now going on record saying the same thing about the Eagles.
With the Eagles?
I think they're one and done.
Yeah.
I think I have zero confidence in them right
Absolutely.
now. And this is something that we have talked about all season.
Mm-hmm.
And it's finally, I feel like, coming to fruition where we have said that their quality of wins are not good. They look like they're scattered. They have no flow.
Mm-hmm.
But they're finding ways to win. Right. And everybody kind of assumed they'll figure it out. They'll start to look like the Eagles. And it's going in the opposite direction.
Mm-hmm.
They barely beat the Giants on Christmas. They lost to the 3-win Cardinals yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a I think a 3-point loss on paper. And it was way worse than that. The score does not show what happened in that game.
Right.
Arizona dominated that game.
Yeah, I think it was it was 35-31.
Yeah.
Arizona took it to Philadelphia.
They absolutely moved the ball at will. Kyler Murray had his best game. They had over 400 yards of offense. And so there's nobody that I have confidence that the Eagles can handle right now in the first round.
Philadelphia, what did they start, like 8-0 or something?
5.
Or
5-0. The Jets beat them. 5-1. All right.
Oh, my bad.
All right. They lost against the Jets.
Oh, look at that.
No, I think they were 10-1.
Were they 10-1? Yeah. So I mean, obviously they throughout the entire thing we would always chip away at them. Like they find ways to win, but there's nothing convincing about their way of playing football. But now that it's kind of like imploded, now all of a sudden
that's a great word for it.
Yeah,
that's a great word for it.
Now all of a sudden they're finding ways to lose. Like the games they'd find a way to win. That's no longer happening, and now all of a sudden everything's just snowballing on them. And obviously during the playoffs, it's going to be magnified to a greater extent. How those players in that locker room take it. Obviously, they have the leadership of Jason Kelsey and Jalen Hurts there, but I mean, it's not looking solid for that team right now.
No,
especially coming off that loss with Arizona.
And we talked about with Tampa Bay, like or specifically with NFC South, who would have thought potentially 2 teams making it? On the flip side,
not me.
If the Bills win this week, they'll wrap up the AFC East and they will get the 2 seed.
Mm-hmm.
Who would have thought at 6-6 after that loss to Philadelphia?
Mm-hmm.
Who would have ever thought that they had the opportunity to win to take the 2 seed?
Right.
That's unbelievable to me.
I mean,
literally everything has fallen their way.
Yep.
I mean, obviously they've had to win the games and kudos to them, but everything they've needed to have happen has done so.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a scenario where they get the 2 seed and there's a scenario where they don't make the playoffs at all.
Completely.
That's
it's
insane.
Crazy.
Yep. That's crazy to me as well. For the Bills, obviously back when they were 6-6, I think we took a look at their schedule and we were like, well, that was not scheduled.
They've won every game.
Yep. That was not.
I personally said that I think 2-3 or 3-2 or whatever, like
Mhm.
that would be good
Right.
based on the teams that they were playing.
Mm-hmm.
And they freaking went like 5-0, I think, at this point.
Yeah, basically. So, I mean, this is back when you still had hopes for the Jets to get in there.
Move on.
We'll move on.
Move on.
So that's why we were going at it so closely on
Yeah.
that schedule making. But I mean, the Bills, they've after they got back to 500, they turned it on. I think, and I feel like this is where the MVP race for the MVP case for on Josh Allen comes in, because he kind of like lifted the entire team up and kind of done it himself in a running back sort of fashion.
So, but that's what I was just going to say. I would counter that and say it hasn't been him. It's been Joe Brady. It's been their offensive coordinator, and it's been the emergence of James Cook, their running back. Because the game, like the Cowboy game, he won that game.
Right.
Josh Allen, like I said, 7 completions under 100 yards.
Right.
James Cook dominated that game.
Right. No, I agree with you.
Yeah, and so
it's just
Joe Brady has completely, in my opinion, it's been him. He's completely turned around the flow of their offense.
No, I agree with you. It's just that at that point where you see a team go 4-0, 5-0 against this daunting.
Oh,
and this is where
absolutely.
This is where we go. Oh, the quarterback deserves all the credit for this, rather than
looking at it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is where the media kind of gets a little bit lazy with dishing out where their awards should actually go to.
Yep.
And that's kind of the point where I've been making. But so for me, yeah, Josh Allen, I don't think there's a case for him. Maybe if you want to bring up his name, we'll talk about it, but it's going to get shut down real quick.
Yep.
So, I mean, in terms of what the Bills and the entire AFC is doing right now, to me, it'd be crazy if the Bills don't make the playoffs, because I feel like they're probably the second most dangerous team in that whole conference.
Agreed.
Right behind the Ravens.
Agreed. Completely.
So,
all right, I'm going to put you on the spot here. I didn't tell you I was going to do this.
No, fantastic.
There's 4 divisions that are undecided.
Okay.
So we got the AFC East and the AFC South, and then we have the NFC East and the NFC South. Okay.
The East and the South.
Yep. So I want you to pick who is going to win each division. So AFC East, you got the Bills and the Dolphins.
Bills are winning.
Winner takes that division. Okay. So we got the Bills.
Because that's my preseason prediction.
Well, all right. Yeah, you've been riding that all year. Forgot about that. AFC South, you have Jacksonville, Indianapolis, and Houston. All 3 can still win the division.
Right.
Who do you got?
Oh, see, this is bad for the Jaguars, because with CJ Stroud's emergence, I feel like this is it for the Jaguars. If you don't win the division this year, I feel like this is all of a sudden going to be CJ Stroud's division to take.
You could argue the same thing with if Anthony Richardson comes back.
See, what the thing is with Indy, they've made it this far with Gardner Minshew,
Yeah.
and I don't know how much Anthony Richardson is going to, I guess, elevate that team.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I mean, during that time he was here, playing for what, first 4 weeks, 5 weeks,
yeah.
He was injury prone. He was still making a little bit of rookie mistakes. Obviously, we didn't have a full season of them, but I'm not sure if Anthony Richardson was healthy all season, if the Colts would be 9-7.
I agree.
I'm not sure about
that.
Yep.
I agree with that.
And then in terms of what the Jaguars are doing, it's like I feel like they're the ones with the pressure on them.
No doubt, and especially considering Trevor Lawrence is not healthy.
Exactly.
It hasn't even been announced if he's going to play this week or not.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, who do the Jaguars play this week?
Tennessee.
Oof.
And then obviously Indy and Houston play each other.
Mm-hmm. I'll go with the Jaguars. I think they'll beat Tennessee.
I'm leaning that way as well.
Right. Yeah. But honestly, it's I wouldn't be surprised if any of those 3 teams win. To be honest with you.
Yep. All right. NFC East.
NFC
Cowboys
East.
win, and they have the division. The Eagles would need obviously a Cowboys loss and an Eagles win.
Cowboys are up against the
play the Commanders.
Right.
The Eagles play the Giants.
Yep, I'm going Cowboys. I think there's more security there. Even though I don't like how either team
I agree
is playing. The Cowboys obviously lost to Miami, and then Miami got blown out by the Ravens, and then Cowboys, I guess, got bailed out against Detroit.
Yeah. They lost to Detroit, but it counted as a win.
Exactly. So, I wish the Eagles would have won against Arizona, so this would have been a little bit easier for me to I guess digest. Like Eagles are maybe turning a little bit around, but I'll stick with the Cowboys beating the Commanders and securing up that East division.
Okay. Last but not least, your division that you have the most interest in, the NFC South. You have obviously Tampa. If they win, they get the division.
Mm-hmm.
The Saints and the Falcons, who play each other, both need a little bit of help.
Right.
Who you got?
What kind of fan would I be if I don't say the Saints?
All right.
I mean, I'm looking at the Panthers. They have nothing to play for.
Nope.
They've already
Zero.
Yep, they already lost their pick. It's not like they're playing for they're only playing for pride at this point. So I'm not sure.
Got shut out by Jacksonville this week.
They got shut out by Jacksonville
for what it's worth.
Oh, so I mean, if you remember, I picked them when they got their second win.
Yeah, and I was flabbergasted by that. Absolutely, just baffled. So mad.
So mad. Oh, that made me laugh. That made me chuckle. I just had to bring that up. Sorry, but I don't feel the Panthers are going to win this game. So I feel like the Bucks are probably going to win the division.
Yeah. It sets up too perfectly for them.
Yeah.
The fact that they have to play the Panthers with a division on the line, I just think that there's no stopping that.
Right. Yeah. It'll be a choke job.
Oh my gosh. Of epic proportions.
Right. If they lose to the Panthers to get knocked out of the playoffs entirely.
Agreed.
So yeah, I'll go with the Bucks win the division. As much as it hurts me to say, but
okay.
But yeah, that's the way I'll go.
Any of the teams that you think that need help. So we've talked about teams that are just winning in, but the teams that need help. So we got the Seahawks, the Saints, the Falcons, the Steelers. Mm-hmm. Any of those teams that you think are actually going to get the help that they need and squeak in?
See, the Steelers, it's
either or.
Right.
It's not both. It's either Jacksonville or Buffalo. Either one of those teams have to lose.
See, and that's
but the Steelers are playing the Ravens, so that's a whole other storyline. What are the Ravens? Are they going to play their starters? They have zero to play for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is a good opportunity for me to bring up Mike Tomlin again.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
17 straight seasons without a losing record.
Unbelievable.
I never would have imagined them going with a winning record, having a winning record at the end of the year with the team that they had, to be honest with you. So, I mean, kudos to him. Even with the winning record, he's moved on from Kenny Pickett a little bit. Gone on. Who's he starting now? Rudolph?
Mason Rudolph, it's been an offensive explosion the last 2 weeks.
Right. So, I mean, it's Mike Tomlin has the juju of all jujus. I feel like he's just the man. So the Steelers, as much as I don't like them, I guess, as a football team, Mike Tomlin just says, "Get out of here." Yeah. So, but the Jaguars and the Bills losing, or either or, and them winning, I find that. See, if anyone loses, it's the Bills against Miami. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they're out of the playoff. That's just nasty to me.
That's crazy.
That's just nasty to me.
That's crazy.
That's so silly. I think the Steelers have I'd put it at 30%.
I hope so. Here's what I hope. I hope the Steelers win so that there's actual pressure on the Bills for the Sunday night, because they're the last game of the week. They're at last game of the regular season, Sunday night football
for the division. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. But if the Steelers and the Jags both win, then it's not only for the division, it's also to get in the playoffs.
Right. Yeah.
Which is just crazy. So that would be so much more entertaining. Obviously, it's still entertaining if if they're already in and the winner gets the division. That's still super entertaining. Mm-hmm. But if you know that if you lose, you're completely out. Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. As a fan of not that team,
right?
That's awesome.
Oh,
so that's what I hope happens.
Yeah,
I'm not saying I want the Bills to lose, because obviously if the Jets aren't in, I thoroughly enjoy rooting for the Bills.
It'd be such a turnstile of the season of what they've just accomplished.
100%, totally on par with their season.
Yep. Well, I mean, yeah, I'd put it at 30%. I think the Bills are going to win, and I feel like the Jaguars are going to win. But if there's one team that's maybe has a chance of losing, it's the Bills, and the Steelers might squeak in there. But I put it at 30%. I'm not going higher.
So for me, it's either the Saints or the Seahawks. Because I really like Green Bay's chances of losing to Chicago. Which we already talked about.
Spoiler alert. Let me look at my notes. That's my upset for the week. Look at that.
Wishful thinking on your part, is it?
Yes, I'm trying to back up.
Yeah. So obviously, if Green Bay loses, that opens the door for either Seattle or the Saints.
Right.
Both of those teams obviously would have to win. So common sense would say I think Seattle has a chance to get in, but I also really think they have a shot at losing to the Cardinals.
Oh, absolutely.
Which normally teams that like the Saints win, they need 2 teams to lose. That's not super likely, but I actually don't hate their chances on paper. So I would say either the Saints or the Seahawks, just because I think it's likely that the Packers lose. So that's my vote.
Okay.
All right. Anything else that I think we pretty much covered it from every angle. Anything else you want to do before we go over power rankings?
I do not have anything in terms of the NFL playoff picture.
Okay. All right. Who do you got for your top 5? It's pretty much it's pretty much locked up at this point, but who do you have for your top 5?
You think so? I'm about to throw a wrench in your power rankings.
Oh yeah.
So number 1, I got the Ravens.
Browns. Oh, okay. You and your Cleveland Browns.
Just you wait.
Number 2, Cleveland Browns.
No, I got the 49ers there still. Number 3, I got the Cleveland Browns.
So do I.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, my man.
Yeah.
So number 4, I actually have the Bills at number 4.
You're crazy.
Just because of how hot they've been, I feel like that's a team that nobody wants to face right now.
Okay, so here's how similar we are.
Okay.
That was my first gut instinct.
Really?
Was to put them at number 4, but then I think about watching the game against New England. It was an ugly game.
Oh yeah.
And so it's that inconsistency. If they hadn't played Bailey freaking Zappi, who threw the ball to the Bills more than he threw it to the Patriots, they probably would have lost that game. Every other quarterback, they did not play well. So that's the part where I'm like, the inconsistency just makes me so dang nervous. Like, yeah, they're on a 4-game winning streak. They're 1 win from getting the playoffs. They're a dangerous team, but that inconsistent and I may have already said this on the show last week. I don't remember, but I told my brother-in-law this. Nobody plays to the level of their competition like the Buffalo Bills.
Right.
Did I already say that?
I can't remember.
I don't remember if I did either.
Right.
But that's not a good thing.
Right.
I mean, it is when you get in the playoffs.
Right.
But I don't know.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. I mean, you look at back when they were 6-6 and they turn it on. I feel like they know kind of when to turn it on. So I'm kind of giving them the benefit of the doubt for that.
Okay.
So especially them being the last game of the regular season, they'll know what needs to happen for them to get in or win the division. I feel like they'll be up to the task.
Okay.
More so than Miami has been looking recently. And then number 5, I went back and forth on this one, but I went with the Lions over the Cowboys.
Okay.
Just because I feel like if there was a rematch, I feel like the Lions might actually win that game.
Yep.
A little bit more convincing.
The Lions did win that game.
Exactly.
That's the crazy part. Like, so I'm just going to get to mine because we're very, very similar. Ravens, 49ers, Cleveland at 3, Detroit 4, Cowboys 5.
Okay.
Because of the exact same thing that you just said. Yep. I mean, in my mind, the Lions won that game. Like, you can't tell me otherwise. So, and again, same thing. Like, especially if it's in Detroit, the Lions are winning that game.
Right.
So, I agree 100%.
Yeah, I mean, look at that.
All right,
look at that.
Same brain.
Same brain.
All right, so this is our last edition of. Well, I guess not technically. It doesn't have to be, but the fantasy season, for all intents and purposes, is over.
If your championship is week 18,
sorry, bud. Sorry about you.
Get out of that league.
Yes, yeah.
Move on.
Your league should be over after this week.
Yep. I agree.
So last week of studs and duds, I have the studs this week. Jeff gave me the honor because I actually made it to a championship game this year.
Yeah, I did not.
He did not, for the first time, I think, in
ever
our adult relationship ever. Like as long as I've known this dude, he's never not made it to a championship or won at least one league.
Right. First time for everything.
Yep, I made it, but I didn't win. Sad day.
No, you got money out of it.
I did. I won some money for my second place finish, so I'll take it. But all right, so quarterback studs. We got Lamar Jackson. Already talked about him. He's the MVP. 36.34 points. He had 321 yards, 5 touchdowns. He had, I think, 30 or 40 rushing yards as well. So great day there. Jordan Love, who balled out on Sunday Night Football, 28 points. He had 256 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, also had a rushing touchdown. Running back, Kyron Williams, who really, for the Rams, has kind of just come out of nowhere the last 5 or 6 weeks and been really the catapult for their offense. He had 30.1 points, 87 yards, 3 touchdowns. Isaiah Pacheco, he pretty much put the nail in the coffin for beating me in my fantasy league this week. He had 29.5 points, 130 rushing yards, 35 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. So he pretty much did it all for Kansas City this week. Wide receiver CeeDee Lamb had a phenomenal game, 227 receiving yards and a touchdown. He did lose a fumble on the stupid. Can we talk about that rule for a minute? Stupid rule. So if you fumble it into the end zone, the other team gets the ball at their own 20-yard line.
Right.
That makes no sense to me. Why? Why does that? Explain the rationale for that decision. It's the stupidest call in all of football.
I do not like that rule. It
makes no sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
like, okay, if you fumble it forward and it goes out of the end zone, like, give it back at like the line of scrimmage. Like, don't give them the yards gained or some like to give the other team the ball when they didn't recover it. It just makes no sense to me.
Yeah, it's
because if the ball, like, let's just say the ball went out just before the pylon,
they'll get the
ball back.
Right there.
Yep. It makes no sense. It makes zero sense. I get so angry when I see that happen in the NFL because nobody can explain that rule.
Isn't there a rule also where you can't advance a fumble?
Correct.
So, like, I find that so weird where the ball advances and all of a sudden it counts as an advancement because it's going into the end zone.
Yep.
So I agree with that. Honestly, I'd be a lot more lenient and be like, wherever he lost a fumble and just put it there. Like, if that's at the 1 yard line, 1 inch line, whatever you want to call it, I'd put it there. I wouldn't even punish him for fumbling it,
right,
to be honest with you. Just wherever he lost the fumble.
It just makes no sense to me. So, All right. Tangent done. Second on the wide receiver stud list was Devontae Adams. He had a great game, 37.6 points, 13 catches, 126 yards, 2 touchdowns.
He's making a good connection there with Aiden McConnell.
He is. So, yeah, took a while, but they're getting there. Tight end and this guy really, the last 2 weeks specifically, has come on super strong is Juwan Johnson from the Saints.
New Orleans. Yep.
He had 23 points. He had 8 catches, 90 yards, and a touchdown. He has been, I would say, Derek Carr's preferred target the last couple weeks.
Yeah.
Even with Chris Olave, Carr is looking at him first. It seems like from what I can tell.
I feel like with Derek Carr's red zone struggles, he needs to look for the bigger body, and that's usually going to be the tight end. And I mean, Jimmy Graham had like a 3 touchdown game streak for a little bit there, and then all of a sudden now Juwan Johnson's taking over there. So, especially in the red zone.
Yep. And then Isaiah Likely, he only had 2 catches, but he made the most of it. He had 2 touchdowns and 42 yards receiving, so he had 18.2 points.
Look at that.
So that's very efficient. And then the defenses, the Texans over, who did they play?
The Texans?
Was it the Titans?
Could be.
I think it was. They had 21 points. They had 6 sacks, a fumble recovery, and a defensive touchdown.
Okay.
And then the Bills, we already kind of talked about it. They had 3 They had 19 total points. They had 3 interceptions, a fumble recovery, and a defensive touchdown. So they had their way with Bailey Zappi. It was the Titans? Yeah, I thought so. And the Bailey Zappi and the Patriots.
Right.
So they had their way with them.
Okay. So duds. So this is where I was my players were standing for most of the year. Jared Goff leading the leading the duds for me right now. 19 for 34, 271 yards, 1 TD, 2 INTs. Not a terrible stat line for an in-game reality, but for fantasy purposes, that's not going to win you.
Great.
Yeah, that's not going to win you anything. Patrick Mahomes, I know he's probably like the number 1 quarterback that was probably taken off the board along with like Josh Allen or something. 21 for 29, 245 yards and 1 TD. So not much even throughout the whole year. So disappointing season for Mahomes fantasy wise. Running backs, Austin Eckler. Obviously he was like a top 5 pick.
A season long dud.
Yep. 13 attempts for 46 yards, 1 reception for 4 yards, and he had a fumble loss. So he had like 4 points. So that was.
Didn't he come back on a 1-year deal? Or maybe I'm making that up because he was a holdout for part of the offseason, and I'm not sure now if he's a free agent or if it'd be better for him if he's under contract because he really didn't do a whole lot this season to bolster his offseason.
Right. Yeah, his free agent status, but I'm not sure. I'd have to look at that.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Another one, Derrick Henry. He's getting a little bit up there in age, but he's only had 12 attempts for 42 yards, and that's basically it. He's he's been on and off. I honestly don't know when the Titans decide to use him and when they don't, or when they decided to lean more on Spears, the other running back in that committee.
Yep.
And then lastly, I got Jahmyr Gibbs. Obviously, he probably got you to a championship.
He did, but I'm sure he did.
But he did not perform during that championship. He had 15 attempts for 43 yards, 1 reception for 3 yards. So didn't have much production, but I mean, are you really going to blame the guy for getting you there?
No.
I hope not.
No.
In terms of wide receivers,
what's funny? Sorry, that's kind of how I felt about Amari Cooper. I was so livid when I saw that he was out Thursday against the Jets. But then I'm like, you know what? He got me 52 points last week. You go take the day off.
Take the day off.
Go ahead. You go put your feet up. Like you earned it. You got me here. You go take the day off.
Yep,
like that's literally like I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. But then I'm like, you know what? That's okay.
Yep.
You did your job. You got me here. And now the team has to step up, and they did not. But it's funny that you say that because that's kind of how I felt when I saw that he was out.
Right. Like, I mean, you obviously want your performers to perform, but at the same time, how mad can you get? Can you get when you get you to the line where only 2 people get you?
Right.
So, but yeah, wide receivers. I got Chris Olave, only 3 receptions for 26 yards.
Yeah.
Romeo Dobbs, who I feel like a lot of us thought he was going to be the number 1 receiver there with Jordan Love in Green Bay, but
I sure did.
Yep, he only had 3 receptions for 28 yards. And Stephon Diggs, he kind of limped throughout the second half of the season. He had 4 receptions for 26 yards. He was on my NFL team, fantasy league, where I got 4th place in that league. But I mean, if he would have showed up even a little bit like he did in the first half of the year, that would definitely have been a different outcome for me.
He had a streak going, and I don't know if he ended up breaking it, but it was like 4 or 5 consecutive games, might have even been longer than that, of under 100 receiving yards. And I think it probably continued to the end of or as we speak, because I don't know if I can't think of the last time he's at 100 yards.
Yeah, I think I was looking at a stat line, and like 6 of the last 7 games, he's held like under 8 points or something.
Yeah,
and that one game I think he had only had a touchdown that kind of like spiked up his point production, but I don't remember how many yards he had. I don't think it was 100 though. But yeah, Diggs kind of limped during the second half of the year. And then tight end, Travis Kelce. I don't. Well, I mean, I would say I don't know what happened with the Chiefs, but I kind of do. They kind of figured out that you shut down Kelce, and the other weapons around him aren't producing to the level that a supporting cast should have, especially years prior with Kansas City. There's no Tyreek Hill there, obviously. But yeah, he had 3 receptions for 16 yards. Pretty mediocre. Sorry, Nick. So, but
yeah,
a little sadness on that one.
I really was relying on him.
Right.
I was winning going into that game.
Right. I mean, and this goes back to our trade back when I had Kelce and Laporta. I had the top 2 fantasy tight ends.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I thought Kelce was going to get injured, but instead he got shut down, and that kind of, I guess, prevented him from injuring himself because he wasn't necessarily doing as much. But yeah, it's just one of those things where Kansas City offense just got shut down.
So it's that, but I also think it's also a combination of 2 other guys who that's the easy narrative. Is the Kansas City offense, they have no weapons, but I also think when you talk about Isaiah Pacheco and Rashee Rice, like if you look at Rice's stat line specifically, he has become the de facto number 1 in that offense. So I think, to your point, people are shutting him down and making sure he's not the reason that they lose.
Right.
But it's also become a little easier for Mahomes because Pacheco and Rice are stepping up.
Yeah, and I mean, they needed to. Obviously, they
still look terrible.
Right.
The offense still looks disjointed.
Yep.
I'm not trying to say that they've figured it out and those 2 guys are now the go-tos by any means. But I think that it's been a little bit easier for him because they've taken a little bit of the load.
Mm-hmm. When you shift a whole offensive scheme off your tight end to, say, a receiver and a running back, it's going to take some time to adjust. And it's just one of those things where, obviously, Rashee Rice is coming on late, and Isaiah Pacheco has been there throughout the year.
He's a stud.
He's a stud. It's just
he's like that little Energizer bunny. Dude, just like when he runs, he cracks me up. But he's a beast.
Yeah, the thing is, I'm not sure if Kansas City is sold on running the ball 100% of the time because of Mahomes.
Right.
So it becomes a hindrance, I guess, their offensive scheme against Pacheco, unfortunately.
Yep.
So, but yep. And then defensively, I got the Dolphins in there. Obviously, they allowed 56 points. They had one fumble recovery and one sack, but the 56 points kind of chucked them down to -7.
Yep. And they also lost Bradley Chubb.
Yep.
To a torn ACL. So that's huge for not only the matchup with the Bills, but the playoffs.
Yeah. So defensively, I think I was like looking at their fantasy stats, and they're like the sixth highest scoring defense. So I found that surprising.
Yeah, me too.
But at the same time, I was like, well, I guess that makes them a little competent when it comes going into the playoffs. But at the same time, losing Bradley Chubb, that's a big, especially from a leadership aspect as well. That's a big loss. So we'll see how
huge.
And we've seen how Miami, I guess, plays against stiffer competition.
Yep.
So we'll see how that works.
Yep. All right. That wrap it up?
Yep.
All right. So that wraps up our fantasy football perspective of this season, really.
Look a lot.
So let us know, I want to do more with the fantasy part of the show. In my mind, at the beginning of the season, I probably was a little bit more involved than what we ended up doing.
Right.
So, I'd love some suggestions on how to make that portion of the show a little bit better, because I know there's a lot of people that listen that play fantasy football. So any suggestions there, we would love for next season. So games to look out for this week. It's pretty easy to highlight the big two.
Yeah, I think there's two big ones.
Which one you got?
So I got the Bills in Miami. So obviously that's going to be the last game of the regular season. That's going to determine the division winner.
Yep.
It might even determine the Bills' playoff
hopes. Yeah.
So there's going to be a lot riding on that game. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Bills, as we discussed, can. Obviously, they won, but if they can rebound from that sluggish performance that they gave the Patriots, I'm not sure if they went in with the mentality of it's just the Patriots, steamroll them, they're coming in hot, whatever. But obviously, with Miami, they just got embarrassed. They got to at least play for something, especially after getting steamrolled like that.
Yeah.
Obviously, they dished it out to Denver earlier in the season. That was a big topic back when that happened. And obviously, Denver rebounded. So it's now Miami's turn to rebound from a blowout loss. So it'll be interesting to see what happens during this game.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I think, obviously having nothing to gain or to lose from this, just being a casual fan, it's exactly the type of game that you want to watch, where there's a lot on the line. And same thing with the other game that I highlighted, Indianapolis versus Houston. The winner is in the playoffs and potentially has a chance to win the division, depending on what Jacksonville does.
Right.
This game got flexed to one of the Saturday games, so it's the late Saturday game. I think it's at 8:15. ESPN. It's their Saturday version of Monday Night Football. So it's going to be a phenomenal game, huge stakes. C.J. Stroud versus
Will Levis, though.
Not Will Levis.
They moved on.
No, Indianapolis. Who am I thinking of?
Gardner Minshew?
Gardner Minshew. Thank you.
Yep.
So we'll see what happens there. Both teams, you could argue, their coaches could win Coach of the Year. So it's going to be a phenomenal game. And so I'm really excited for that matchup as well. So those are the two big ones with probably the biggest implications going into the last week of the season.
Right. Yep.
Awesome. So we will wrap it up. This is just a formality at this point. with our picks.
Not for me. I take credit in this.
So I went 1-1 last week. I should have gone 2-0 because I got screwed just like Detroit got screwed. So I feel your pain, Detroit. I had them as my upset. So I went 1-1, which puts me at 14-14. I had
look at that, Mr. Consistent.
I know, yeah, call it that. Who did I have? So I had Detroit over the Cowboys as my upset. I had the Niners over the Commanders as my lock. And then Jeff went 1-1 last week to put him at 18-10.
Oof.
He had the Bills over the Patriots as his lock, and you had the Raiders as your upset over the Colts, and they did not.
They lost by 3.
They did not win.
Almost pulled it out.
So you have officially clinched the season 1 picks championship. So go pound salt. So we'll do some picks. We'll do this week, just the last week to wrap it up. So my lock, I have the Cowboys over the Commanders. I think, Commanders have nothing to play for. Cowboys have everything to play for. So that one goes without saying. And then my upset, I kind of already leaked in the beginning of the show. I have the Cardinals over the Seahawks. Seahawks are a 3-point favorite, and they're on the road. They're at Arizona. So that surprised me a little bit, that line. But that's my upset, Cardinals over Seattle.
Look at that. All right. Well, my lock is the Lions over the Vikings. Obviously, like the Cowboys, the Lions are basically right there, 11-5.
Yep.
Playing for home field advantage throughout, or not throughout, but at least one more game, one more stage into the playoffs, over the Vikings and the Cowboys. So I have the Lions over the Vikings, eliminating the Vikings' hope, without doubt. And then upset, I got the Bears over the Packers. Packers are favored by 3 points. It's just one of those things where I feel like the Bears are showing up at the right time and kind of figuring things out.
Yep.
I heard they're going to give Trestman another year.
Oh, did really?
That's what I heard. I can't remember where, but I heard from somewhere. But yep, I feel like continuity is probably going to help that team. So the Bears over the Packers.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll recap that next week and
see if I get to 20.
Yeah, well. See if I get to 20.
I just needed to put that shot in there.
Whatever. All right. So we will be back next week obviously during the big who the heck's playing? Miami and Bills
Buffalo.
game. Gosh, you got me so rattled. I hate losing to you. Oh, I hate losing to you.
I might have lost in fantasy, but I won in something.
All right. So we will be back next Sunday, as we always are, during the Sunday night game. Bills at the Dolphins, breaking down. By then, we should pretty much know all the matchups.
Yeah.
And I don't think we'll have times released yet at that point. It's normally middle of the night, like Monday. But if we do, we'll break all that down as well for the first round of the playoffs. And then we will be back every Sunday during the three first rounds, breaking down the action.
Right.
And then obviously we'll do something after the Super Bowl to pretty much wrap up
the season. Yep.
All right.
Gotcha.
Well, we went long. I kind of thought we would.
Right.
We had a lot that we wanted to go over this week. Obviously, Jeff being gone, there was a lot that we wanted to catch up on.
Yeah, there's a lot of conversation we have not had.
Correct.
That
wasn't necessarily related to this week, but just action in general.
Right.
But I thought it was good. I thought it was needed. So we will be back. Lots of good football next week. So buckle up and enjoy, and we will be back to cover it all with you guys next week.
Nice.
Peace out.
Go Saints.
Thanks for listening to What Did They Know podcast. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media outlets to see future episode details, and don't forget to send in any questions or topics that you want to see the guys discuss in their weekly episodes to come.